And then if that's the case, does that not mean we are all divine beings with a divine purpose? And it's through the storytelling that we can become closer to that realization and that reckoning with our purpose. And it's those shared words and that shared breath with the shared meaning behind those words unites us, and it allows us to become more cohesive and collaborative in our work, that we're all doing this together. One of the intentions was to instill and invoke a lifelong love of learning and allow children to feel the freedom of creativity and the freedom of wondering and asking questions. And yet just know that we are not in isolation or alone, that we are all here together, no matter what type of work we're doing.
In today's world of accelerating schedules, standardized testing, and digital noise, it can feel like we're losing something vital, especially when it comes to how we raise and educate our children. But here's something we don't often consider, and that's that many of us are still carrying an inner child who never got the education they truly needed. An education of rhythm, reverence, and real connection. And in this episode, I'm joined by Waldorf educator Chloe Makowski for a rich and grounded exploration of whole child education, not just for the children in our lives, but as a living metaphor for how we might re-educate the inner child in each of us. Waldorf education is rooted in the teachings of Rudolf Steiner and honors developmental stages through imaginative play, nature connection, and storytelling. But more than anything, it calls us back to a slower, more soulful way of being, one that prioritizes presence over performance and connection over content. Together, Chloe and I explore what it means to nurture the soul through ritual, rhythm, and relationship, and why these qualities are essential not only in childhood, but throughout our lives. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, or someone on a journey of inner healing, I think you'll find something here that speaks to your own unfolding. So I am curious to hear your thoughts as a Waldorf teacher. When you hear the phrase whole child education, what comes to mind?
That the child is being taught through the understanding that we have many facets to our human existence. And education is not just a cognitive experience, but it is emotional, physical, and there's also that spiritual element to educating the child in Waldorf pedagogy.
I'm curious about the spiritual component first. Where I worked more in a public school sector, I also worked in an elective capacity where it was more of a spiritually centered classroom. We were the exception to the rule. So I'm curious how you see, how does one see the spiritual component of educating a child in the day-to-day experience of learning?
Well, every day our class begins with the speaking of a morning verse. And in the morning verse, we speak about looking into the world in which the sun is shining, in which the stars are sparkling and the stones repose. And that's the verse that we have for the older grades. And then there is a verse that the younger grades have where they speak about the sun with loving light makes bright for them each day, and their soul with spirit power gives strength unto their limbs. So we begin each day with an intention that the children will be using their will, their thoughts, and their emotions to do good and productive work. Even the approach of the Waldorf main lessons allow the students to develop through humanity and through their own social existence, such as we teach children about ancient civilizations, and we teach children, the stories of the Hebrew Bible in ways that they have this shared human existence that also is in reverence to authority and the natural world. There are a lot of importance placed on festivals in the Waldorf education. The festivals, of course, occur at certain times of the year, such as Michaelmas, to help us when the seasons begin to change from the summer to the fall and the harvest, in finding the strength that we need within ourselves to withstand that seasonal change. Again, when fall turns to winter and it gets darker outside earlier, we have Martinmas, where we find the light within ourselves to withstand the darkness. So it comes right out to the children where I say, okay, today we're going to sit down and we're going to learn about, your spirituality and your divinity. But it's something that is incorporated into the rhythms of the week and the rhythms of the year, as well as in the daily rhythms with our verse and whatever main lesson the children will be experiencing that day.
As you were sharing those daily verses, like there was something that was happening for me, there's a feeling to
Yes.
that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm curious because you talked about, like you said, it informs the rhythm of the day. How does the opening verse inform a day's rhythm?
Firstly, it unites the children. So we come together. Usually, we will light a candle. We'll place our hands on our chest. We'll cross our hands on our chest just above our hearts. We'll have a moment of silence where we just breathe together a few times. We find a stillness in our mind and in our body. And then collectively, we all begin to speak the verse. And it's those shared words and that shared breath with the shared meaning behind those words unites us, and it allows us to become more cohesive and collaborative in our work, that we're all doing this together. And of course, there's a closing verse also. That's up to the teacher's preference. But currently, the closing verse for my class that I've had for the past 2 years is a verse also written by Steiner. That is to wonder at beauty, stand guard over truth, look up to the noble, and resolve on the good. And this leads us truly to purpose in living, to right in our doing, and to peace in our thinking. And then I thank them for their work for the day, and I bless the blessings on the rest of your afternoon, students. And we all speak that together also as a way to show gratitude and reverence for the work that we did engage in that day together. Mm-hmm.
That's a beautiful way to bookend a day. An
Yes.
opening ritual rooted in verse, a closing ritual rooted in verse, and this uniting of breath, purpose, intention,
yes,
vision. I mean, I feel like I have so many questions, but it sounds like there is a real rich tradition of the incorporation of ritual into the approach to educating a child.
Yes. Yes. We as humans know that when we have rhythm to our day and rhythm to our week, we feel safer and secure and more confident in the things that we do, because we know what is expected of us and we know what we're doing, whether it be a Monday or the month of April, or even just the marking of time, such as in December, when it's time for us to recognize Advent. there's a different verse for each week of the month of December. And even those verses are just a reminder of this time of year and our connectivity to one another and to the spirit world and to the natural world. Rhythm is, I mean, even as I'm talking to you, I'm feeling the rhythm of my own body. My heartbeat is a little jittery and a little bit racing, and that's rhythmical. And then I have to remind myself to take a little bit deeper of a breath to relax that rhythm. And even my breath is a rhythm, and those are connected. So the rhythms are vitally important to our existence and our shared experiences.
It does feel so critical. I think about how easy it is to lose a sense of rhythm in the day to day.
Yes.
And the consistent battle of rhythm in so many ways, especially something that often comes up, at least one that I faced in the classroom, was the disruption of technology.
Yes.
Where it's very difficult when a notification appears on your phone to not instantly respond to it.
Right.
And disrupt the rhythm that is occurring around you.
Absolutely.
And within you.
Yes. Yes.
I'm curious, like how do you approach like maintaining rhythm throughout a day? There's the opening verse with this really beautiful opening ritual.
Yeah.
So then how do you continue that throughout the day?
We then have a main lesson after our morning verse, but even before the main lesson, we continue with this group work of either another recitation that may be relevant or pertinent to whatever our main lesson work entails. And those change throughout the year as well as throughout each school year, each grade, they change. And so, for example, when we were doing our South America block, I had the children reciting a Pablo Neruda poem together at the beginning of the day. And then we would play on our recorders a Peruvian folk song. And then we would sing a Peruvian folk song. And so even that is built into our rhythm, that after we say our verse, we know that we'll continue in some artistic expression together before getting into the bulk of the academic work. And stories are the majority of our academic lessons. And that's the teacher standing and relating and telling the students about, maybe it is a country in South America, or perhaps it was our anatomy block and we were learning about the circulatory system. And the academic work is done through storytelling, and that's done in the beginning of the day. So those new lessons and the new concepts for the children can sit with them throughout the day. And then another healthy part of the rhythm to our day is sleep. And the teacher hopes that the children get a good night's sleep so their mind and their body can fully process what they had learned in the beginning of the day. So then when we come back together the following day, it's a recap, but really that's a recapitulation, and that's remembering and drawing upon what we had learned the day before. So we incorporate into this rhythm, this carrying through of one day to the next with a deeper understanding of what was brought forth the previous day. And then, of course, they can only withstand about 2 hours of that before they tell me that their digestive rhythm needs to be attended to, and that it's snack time and they need to take a break. So just as important it is for them to sit and listen and to be quiet during the lesson, it's also important for them to feed the body as much as the mind and to move the body. So recess is still a large part of our middle schoolers' day. It's actually one of my favorite times of the day to watch them interact socially freely with each other and what they end up doing together in their free time before we can come back together for the math lesson or the language arts lessons, which occur every day, are separate from the main lessons that we do in the morning. And then, there's specialties also. We have music lessons on Thursday, circus arts on Monday, handwork and woodwork are also important. So a large part of this style of education is teaching through doing instead of just being. So they need to be able to experience it, which is why having a poem and a song and a recorder piece from that culture, or that can supplement, an anatomy lesson, is so important to them. So it's not just these words, but something that they can feel and move into their physical bodies also. So important for them.
That is such an interesting facet of this, of like what you're describing, this rhythm, is that it's so multifaceted, it's so
Yes.
multidimensional. And the thing that continues to strike me is the incorporation of story, music, and art.
Absolutely.
I'm really curious about that. I mean, you talked about how it helps the concepts to stay with the student, but I'm really curious about the intention behind the story, music, art as part of what they're learning in the classroom.
I think because stories unite us in that shared human experience. Some of the earliest stories, even told by man, were, and from what we know, I'm sure there's a lot of conjecturing involved, but from what you know, some of the earliest stories told by man were those mythology-based tales, those nature-based tales, which were told to describe and explain natural phenomenon, such as, what is that large glowing orb in the sky? So many of those ancient stories about that large glowing orb in the sky, the sun became the creator god. And that's, you're going to find that in every ancient mythology, that the sun is the creator god. And through the telling of these stories to the students from a young age, up until they have, astronomy lessons in eighth grade, the sun is carried through as this, again, it's the shared human experience that all of these ancient cultures, whether it was Asia, whether it was Africa, whether it was, in indigenous America, that was the creator. And through the telling of stories, children don't live in isolation or don't feel that they are alone, because from this understanding that every culture has a very similar reason behind some of these stories. Many of the ancient mythology have the story of the flood. This, what happened during the flood? Well, people were misbehaving. They were told they needed to behave or the floods were going to come. And you find this reoccurring flood story, and also in so many ancient cultures. And so the stories are a way for the children to learn without actually having to go out and encounter or make those same mistakes. Let me explain this a little bit differently. So the pedagogy in Waldorf, each school year has almost a different theme to it. And that theme is based on childhood development, but not so much childhood developmental psychology, because if we remember, anthroposophy predates psychology by a few decades. And so this Steiner's anthroposophy and was in about the late 1800s. And so by the time the first Waldorf school was created in 1919, he already had like this curriculum roadmap that these children at this age need to learn these stories because that's what is important for their development. So the first graders, they'll hear stories about fairy tales. And not just Grimm's fairy tales or Perrault's or Andersen's, but again, fairy tales from many different cultures from around the world, because they all have those very similar themes. And the fairy tales teach these first graders that they need to behave themselves or they're going to get in trouble. And that's the point of these fairy tales. So basically, the first graders are learning that they need to behave themselves or they're going to get in trouble. But they're not being told, sit down and be quiet, or I'm going to send you to the principal's office.
Mm-hmm.
They hear the story about the little boy who cried wolf, and nobody believed him until it really was a wolf, and boy, was he then in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So it's through this pedagogy that the students learn these lessons. In second grade, the stories are about saints and the animal fables, because there's a duality to the second grader when they start having that inner dialogue. Around the age of 8 and 9 is when children stop having imaginary friends and they start having their own inner dialogue. And what is their inner dialogue saying? Is it telling them to behave in this saintly way, or is it telling them to behave in this more animalistic way? So we tell the stories of the saints and the fables for the children to internalize, to make the better choices about their behaviors and whatever consequences. In the third grade, the children learn about the ancient Hebrew stories. And in that way, it's like listening to the voice of God, respecting and having reverence for authority, because as we're getting older and we're losing that imaginative sense and things are becoming more real, and we need to tell children the stories at this age so they know to respect their authority figures and, again, continue to make right choices. And fourth grade, the theme is Norse mythology, because astrology begins to stream into the children. And so the children, they're getting these little flashes at the end of their 9-year change of their future selves. And so they learn these stories of Norse mythology about when people do misbehave, when people do get mad, or when people do play tricks, or, maybe when people do know the right things to do. Fifth grade is of the ancient civilizations. So we learn about all of the old world religions and their evolution towards that golden age of ancient Greece with the democracy and the philosophy, because at that time in a children's life around 11 years old, all of their physical rhythms are in harmony. Things are in perfect ratio at that time. And then it all goes downhill from there when they turn 12. You ask any adult to this day, you ask them, what was the most toughest year of your life? And the majority of them will probably say 12, because you're no longer a little child. You're not considered a teen yet. And so you're in this space of thinking you knew who you were, thinking you understood how things worked. And now you're beginning to look at things differently and with newer eyes. So in sixth grade, we tell stories of ancient Rome, the fall of Rome, and the Dark Ages. And so through the telling of those stories, we also give the students this 100-day Squire Challenge, where we expect them to turn away from the dark vices and to focus on the light and virtuous behaviors and virtuous choices, which leads us to seventh grade and the Renaissance. But as you can see, these stories, as we talk about child development and telling them certain stories at certain ages to help them along their maturation, it's it's mirroring the maturation of the world itself.
Mm.
So even through recognizing that, again, it's just this shared human experience. And when they're 12 and 13 years old, they hear the story of the Renaissance, this rebirth. And at the age of 12 and 13, children, teenagers, tweens and teens, they're no longer children, but they revert and resort to almost toddler-like behaviors sometimes, where they get really moody and they're always tired and they're always hungry and they're whiny. But that's why in the Renaissance block, we focus on the beauty in the world, and we focus on the technological advancements, and we focus on, even the mathematics during the Renaissance, the science in the Renaissance, all of it became new again because it was what was lost during that fall of Rome and the Dark Ages. So we're helping the children um, look towards their future again, because you can sometimes get steeped and stuck in those dark ages, because that's when hormones begin to kick in and puberty begins to happen, and that's new and different to them also. But with the beauty of the Renaissance and the rebirth of this classical thinking, we can help them look at the world with newer eyes. And that only lasts a very short time before the Reformation and revolutions that we study in 8th grade, which is also very beneficial, because at the time of 14 years old, when their astral body has hopefully firmly landed within the student, that's when they begin to break away and they want to feel more independence in their life. But they need to do it in a healthy way. So we tell them the stories of the French Revolution and the American Revolution and maybe the South American revolutions at the time. We tell them the stories of these heroes. And again, so important, these archetypal figures for the students in these stories. And the odd thing about these archetypal figures, they didn't set out or have the awareness that they were helping the progress of humanity, but it was just what they did during their life was so pivotal to the movement of the ages, that when the students hear these stories and then they can identify with them and relate with them and then internalize it. I mean, when it can be done right, it's a it's a beautiful thing, and you can see it in the students. When the students are receiving these stories and these pedagogy at the right developmental times in their lives, they become, these powerhouses of creative and critical thinkers, that really seem to know who they are and who each other is, and having again that cultural awareness through those shared human experiences, that the stories tell. Yeah.
It's such a beautiful way to approach development.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of something that Michael Mead talks about. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he specializes in mythology. He's a storyteller.
I should know who he is. I want to know who he is.
He talks about story, and he does a lot of wordplay, but he talks about the word story as connected to storehouse.
Oh,
Where stories
yes.
become a storehouse of knowledge that is
Yes.
kept over time, that maybe has been lost in the present, but remembered from the past.
Isn't that something? Of course, as stories store all of these informations. That's
Mm-hmm.
why they're called stories. Yes. Yeah, I always wanted to liken the word story to history. And because history itself is a story. and it's being told by certain people for certain reasons. Um, and so there then blurs those lines of mythology and history. How much of these stories were once true or believed to be true, and how did that evolve, and how much of our stories that we know as history are also myth. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But stories as storehouses, I love that.
Yeah, there's an idea of developing or creating a personal mythology, like the story of me,
Yes.
which feels very lost as an art. I took a class that is probably one of the most influential classes I've ever taken. It was called Sacred Purpose and Professional Practice.
Okay.
This is one of my anchor courses in my master's program. And one of the things that you're doing is essentially creating this personal myth of anchoring yourself to that soul level purpose in the world. And I remember during that course feeling so much struggle internally. I felt just so disconnected. I couldn't figure it out.
Wow.
Until I began working through Norse mythology.
No kidding.
And the two stories that really connected for me were Odin going to the well, where he drinks from the well and gains the power of poetry.
Yes.
And wisdom. And then when Odin hangs from the world tree and gains the power of the runes.
It's true.
And it was these two stories that felt like they unlocked something for me where I could then move through the course material and have very profound experiences.
Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. No, I love it. I love that. It was sacred purpose in or through professional and sacred purpose and professional practices. Yes. Uniting the divinity with the intellect in education. Yes. Just we are all, it's I've heard people say, and I don't know if it's Edgar Casey or another. He said something, or there was another man of his status and stature that said that God created humans in his own image. Is that right? And then if that's the case, does that not mean we are all divine beings with a divine purpose? And it's through it's through the storytelling that we can become closer to that realization and that reckoning with our purpose. Yes.
It's a really powerful gift to be able to give a child, at least from like the way that, like from my perspective, especially because as an adult, feeling disconnected from the story of the past, there was a sense of disconnected from myself and like almost floating. And so the idea of nurturing a child through their developmental journey through story, there's a profound power in that.
That's true. It's interesting that you brought to mind that story of Odin hanging himself on the world tree. It was Yggdrasil, yes. And then moving through that, I mean, we can say that's fourth grade and being 10 years old and in Waldorf. And then moving through when they're in sixth grade and they're about 12 years old, we hear the story of another man that was also, hung from wood before he too could be reborn. And we tell the story of Jesus Christ's life through history and mythology to the students. And we teach it in a healthy, like non-secular way. And to see the realization in the children that, oh, we know Christmas, we know Easter, but they never knew the story and the story of Christmas and the story of Easter, and being able to present it to them in a way that's developmentally appropriate. It gives them a new and different understanding of how the world, or how they relate to the world, and the evolution of that story to fit certain times in the world's own evolution. Like now, the meaning behind those days are lost to the tree with the gifts under it, or the baskets with the chocolate in it. So I can hear that there needs to be, as you were saying, that the daily distractions, right? Where's the meaning behind some of the things that we do? It's almost like, did consumerism become our new religion in almost a sad way?
There is the idea that to move forward is to move towards transformation, and to move backwards is to experience commodification. And are we engaging in a learning experience that is focused on transformation?
Right.
Or are we participating in the commodification of learning?
Oh, yes. That reminds me of a quote that Steiner has. And the quote that he says is about, to live in a socially right way, humanity must educate in a socially right way. And that would be the transformation of this current existence. Yeah.
It's in some ways it's a radical idea.
A radical idea that's more than 100 years old.
It is. Where you look to the past and you say, wow, there's some really profound wisdom in there. Yes. What does it mean to live in a socially right way? What does it mean to learn in a socially right way? Mm-hmm. And then to look at humans through this really nuanced lens of perception. There were two things that you mentioned that I thought I am curious about. You talked about the astral body through this educational lens. Mm-hmm. I'm curious about that, first of all, because the way that I hear astral used in more common social parlance, I don't know how, like, it evokes a very certain perception in my mind, like an image in my mind. And so I'm curious, what is it, like, how are you seeing this play out for children?
So Steiner's anthroposophy has this concept of a fourfold human being, that when we are born, we are only born with a physical self. And we are contained within this physical self from about the ages of 0 to 7. And during that time, we are very dependent upon other people to provide all of our needs for us. So we live in this very physical space. And then about the time of 7, when your baby teeth fall out and your secondary teeth begin to grow in, etheric body comes into play. And the etheric body is more of a life force, almost an energy field. Some people have even likened it to a person's aura, because it takes the physical shape of the physical body, yet it's just light and an energy field that emanates from. So that's the life force. And much as the physical body can be considered, just rocks and minerals, it's, just our bones and our skin. The etheric body, they call it the plant body, is the water and the warmth. And from about the age of 10, there's glimpses, but not really until about 14 is the astral body a part of the human being. And the astral body is more a body of consciousness, a body of understanding emotions and feelings and the external world, and how you fit into that world. So the astral body is the air body, and it's that energy that comes from, what this, I mean, it makes you think of stars, right? Astrology, it makes you think of stars. And so that is your almost your past, your present, and your future in cosmology. And how it has entered your being at this age of about 12, 13, 14 years old. And it helps almost balance and harmonize the physical and etheric bodies with an understanding of an interrelatedness and that social connectedness. And then there's the fourth fold is the ego or the I. And that really doesn't come into place or is established or set until about the age of 21 or 22. So you can see there's about these 7-year place markers for these different bodies in the fourfold. The 0 to 7 is the physical body, and then 7 to 14, the etheric, and then 14 to 21 is that astrality body, and then it's the ego is that about that 21st year and that helps just regulate into this whole being. So there's the fourfold body, and then there's also a threefoldness to the fourfold human, where the physical body helps with the willing and the practical work. We're in 7 to 14, 7 to 14 is that etheric body, and that helps with thinking. And then the feeling is the astral body. So you have the willing, the thinking, and the feeling threefoldness of this fourfold human being. So the astrality is just almost like an understanding of yourself and others.
That is a beautiful image to have.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I feel like I have like lots of questions, but also a lot of thoughts around it. I guess I'm really thinking about some of the psychological stuff that I'm really interested in, which is I'm really interested in like the blending of eco psychology and depth psychology.
Okay.
And where you have this idea of a nature-based, soul-centric view of human development.
Yes.
And one of the fundamental facets of the development of a person, like a person who is in a place of wholeness, is this connection to, I think, the equivalent of this astral body.
Right.
This being in a sense of place and relatedness to self, other people, and the world.
Right.
And being able to have the energy necessary from within to bring that into the world.
Yeah, and it's unique and, of course, individualized to every person. It's their own astrality, and through this learning process, coming to almost own themselves, but not quite yet being complete. I mean, you would think once your astral body streams in like that, that would be it. Yes, here I am world, but that's still just, one more step along this path of human development. And it also, I'm sure you're familiar with Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages of development. I wonder how much he was influenced by Steiner's work, because he also has these stages of life that are almost the same age frames as what Steiner has laid out for the fourfold human. But these tasks that we need to accomplish before we can move to that next stage of development, it's not, of course, it's fluid. You can always return, willfully or unwillfully return to a previous stage to try to accomplish it with greater success. But I see in this style of education these similar stages of around the age of 7 to 14. Erik Erikson would have said, well, this is when students learn of their own industriousness, or they don't quite fail, but they don't succeed in becoming industrious, and then they suffer from these feelings of inferiority. And then about the ages of 14 to 21, when that astral body is streaming in, Erik Erikson says this is either when a person will form their own identity, or they're left with confusion about who they are. And again, through the use of stories, through the storytelling that this style of education provides, we help them move through these developmental stages more successfully by giving them that more global awareness of these experiences, that no matter how hard this might feel for this person at this day, guess what? You're part of something greater and bigger that has also had these feelings of uncertainty and then been met with success, later at a different time. So there's psychology, even though it wasn't psychology yet, is very deeply rooted into this educational method. Yes.
Definitely. There's definitely a lot of overlap there.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it's so different. I almost want to say contrary to the way that I see a more like traditional Western approach to education.
Yes, unfortunately. Yeah, I feel that way sometimes too.
Where it can feel like where in seeing the whole child and nurturing the whole child, there is a cultivation of this capacity for imagining and being.
Yeah.
As opposed to grinding the imagination to dust.
Right.
And becoming exceptionally task-oriented and losing creativity.
Exactly. Yes, I know. I believe it. And I think one of the intentions of Waldorf education was to instill and invoke a lifelong love of learning, and allow children to feel the freedom of creativity and the freedom of wondering and asking questions. And and the teacher not always having the answer is also beneficial to the student's own critical thinking and problem solving. Something as simple as saying to a student's question, well, I wonder. And leave it at that, and let them explore through their own thought processes and experiences what could the answer be, as opposed to this is the answer, and this is the answer I want you to give me every time I ask you this question. So yeah, the traditional, I don't know if I could be a traditional public school teacher, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Yes, yeah. especially now with the push of um, devices, using iPads for their academic work, as opposed to, having that, the cardstock or the parchment paper with the fountain pen, and just writing with a pen on paper alone provides so much more, I want to say, cognitive awareness of the learning than just, pressing a button on a, or not even a button on a screen. There's a lot of the art of learning is being lost through this push of technology usage in the classroom. Yeah.
Yeah, there really is. It makes me wonder, where we have such a prevalence of technology that is coming in. I mean, there's a lot of positive things that can come from that. But I'm curious about the other side of the coin, which is the nature connection.
Mm.
Because this is something that you've talked about a few times already, and I'm curious about how do we cultivate that within the child's experience?
How do we cultivate being in touch with the natural world? By being in it. So again, it's like the rhythm of the day, the rhythm of the year, um, the music, the recitations, the songs, the just not having the reliance or the dependence on it, as the teacher for the lesson. Um, I'm modeling. Like I refuse to answer text messages if I'm teaching. I also, I don't keep a lot of my work and my notes on a computer. I still have notebooks and notebooks and notebooks and, scribblings here and scribblings there and pens that are constantly running out of ink because I'm constantly using them. And, even though some people say through the use of technology, it's connectivity, it's not, it's a disconnect. And where the real human connection is really to just put those devices away and to put them down and to see the other. Even, I said that the day starts with a verse, but the day actually starts even before our verse, where I will greet each child, where I look them in the eye and I shake their hand and I say good morning and I state their name. And that helps me see them that day. The look in their eye, the strength of their handshake, and I get to see how they're standing. I get to see, their, do they want to be do they want to be there that day? Are they going to look me back in the eye? Are they going to, shake my hand firmly, or is it going to be, limply, and they're going to kind of roll their eyes? It helps me connect to them and almost get a feel for what type of day that child will have. And maybe I do need to give them a little extra attention because did it look like they were a little bit upset when they shook my hand? Was their handshake colder than usual or warmer? Are they not feeling well? And so really through absolutely not using the technology at all, is a way to cultivate them not relying upon it. But of course, we're a commuter school. So for them to be social with each other when the school isn't in session, they do need their devices to stay connected. Fortunately, a lot of the parents feel similarly about limiting the technology use for students, because it's so easy for them to get drawn in and spending hours upon it. Also, we have a lot of conversations in the middle school about instant gratification and delayed gratification. So I think it's important to say that delayed gratification is so much more beneficial to a person, that they can work at something, that they can use their willing and their thinking and their feeling and get more in touch with what they truly want by not receiving things instantly. And, if a student asked me a question that I didn't know the answer to, it could be so easy for me to just Google it right in front of them and say, oh, well, here's your answer. But what do we really learn from that experience? Also, a lot of our specialty classes are hands-on. So the handwork classes that we do, where there's a lot of fiber arts, the woodwork classes, of course, when they're doing the construction in the building, and then even the music classes and the circus classes, all of that also is delayed gratification. It's something that they really have to work towards to be able to do something successfully. And we do have gardening classes also. So it's also important for the students to get their hands dirty and to do some real work, whether it be weeding or planting, pruning, beautification projects. Maybe they're mulching, and just planting, digging, getting dirty and being outside. Movement classes are important for them to get in touch with their physical selves and to be active. So there's a big, it's technology just doesn't fit into just doesn't fit into what we do, because again, it's that concept of industriousness that we're teaching through doing and being connected to each other, the earth through gardening, and the arts through all of the handwork, woodwork, and artwork we do. Mm-hmm.
I think it's really interesting that in discussing the importance of connection to the natural world, the first place we went was the natural world within the human. And the human connection that is also a component to the natural world. Like, we are part of it. We're not separate from it.
No, it's true. Yes.
There is an honoring of that in eye contact and in physical contact, and in feeling the soil, feeling the earth, and honoring through the celebrations and the rituals of the seasonal change.
Yes.
And a way to connect to the natural world that is within us as well as outside of us.
Right. We had a wonderful experience in the beginning of March. The class went camping for 3 days and 2 nights, and it was on Mount Lemmon. And so we went from 90 degrees in Phoenix that day up Mount Lemmon to where it was maybe in the upper 60s during the day, and then at night, maybe the 40s. Yeah, at first we thought it was going to snow when we were there. And so when I first told the children the weather report and I said there's a chance of snow, and they were so excited and they cheered and they were yelling, oh, this is going to be great. It's going to snow. It's going to be so much fun. And I'm standing there being like, I don't want to be camping in the snow. But because they were so excited for it, it made me excited for it also. And so we arrived on the afternoon of a Monday, and we didn't leave until more than 48 hours later on Wednesday. There was no cell phone service. The students were asked not to bring their cell phones. And then, of course, there wasn't going to be any cell phone service anyway. So what would they even be doing with their phones? And there was so much playing and laughing and just human engagement and interaction. It was probably one of the biggest learning experiences they could have had this year, and it didn't even happen in the classroom. despite the cold, they woke up Tuesday morning. Like the first thing I hear from their tents was laughter. The next morning, Wednesday morning, it had rained all Tuesday night. And they were told they weren't allowed to wear their shoes in their tent because there were just 2 tents for all of the students. And so all the boys were in one tent, all the girls were in the other tent, and all their shoes were outside. And it had rained all night. And even after all the rain, they woke up laughing just because they were together and they were outside in nature, experiencing it firsthand, putting on their shoes, soaking wet. And they were like, oh my God, my shoes are so wet, laughing. Not a single one of them was unhappy because they were not only connecting with each other in a way that they were never could before, but connecting with each other and nature in a way that they never had before. It was honestly a very emotive experience for me because I was just facilitating a camping trip. I didn't realize the true value or importance of it. And thank you, Dan, for helping us to facilitate that camping experience for them also. Yeah.
It was such an interesting experience. It's like I've taught for a long time, and I've taught in a lot of different domains of learning, but it was very different being in like a learning setting with that particular group of kids before that trip. There was, how do I even put it into words? There was like a renewal that I experienced, like a renewal of hope even, and like a love of life and love of experience that those children convey in their way of being in the world that felt so uniquely special.
Yeah, they really are. It's how some people approach things that are unfamiliar to them. They might be a little worried or nervous or scared. But I feel like with this particular group of children, they encounter something unfamiliar and they encounter it with this sense of curiosity, this, well, what will happen? Let's see, let's find out. And that sense of excitement to experience what will be. And it's so special to be a part of. It really is.
I believe it. I mean, this kind of experience of learning, this classroom experience you're describing, sounds like it is pure magic, which I'm sure that there are plenty of days that feel less magical. But it really, there is, and when I say magical, I mean like there's this deep sense of wonder that this seems to convey, at least that I feel you conveying in the way that you describe this learning environment that they're in.
It's like the human becoming. It's providing them with as much awareness to see the bigger picture and to see what it's really all about, to not get stuck in the daily when we know there's so much more that can and will be experienced. It is magical because I've been with the majority of this particular group of kids. I've been with them since they were in 3rd grade, and I've known many of them since they were in kindergarten and preschool. And to watch them become who they are today has been a gift that I've been tasked with sharing in their human experience. And I don't, of course I practice humility. Like I know that I'm, okay, let me take that back a little bit. I practice humility, yes. But what I would like to take back is that there's also this idea that in Waldorf education, that the students and the teachers are karmically connected,
Mm.
that they were, chosen to be together along this path to learn from each other. Steiner says that there's no book in the world that can teach someone to be a teacher. What's going to be a teacher's teacher is the child. And I learn from them probably more than what they learn from me. And then that also shows me how I can approach them and teach them along that individual path through their development. And so, like I said, some of these students I've known for 10 years now and have been their teacher for half of that time. And to have been able to see them along these different stages of this path. And I can say, I'd seen that in you all along, or I knew you were going to be capable of this, or I knew you would be able to do this. And seeing them continuously try and have the will and the want to learn it's pure magic.
I'm curious how you prepare yourself for a day of teaching, because like in this instance, there is so much required of you to be present in a way that facilitates this environment. So what does that look like for you in like a beginning, a middle, and end of the day?
It's funny. I still get a little bit nervous before the beginning of every day. But that's good, because even I tell the students, your little bit of anxiety, a little bit of nervousness is a good thing. It reminds you that you need to be the best you, and that there is pressure upon you to perform, but that pressure is just preparing you to do your best work. So I'm basically modeling throughout the day how to behave. So yes, I do. I'm a little bit nervous every morning before lessons begin, but every night before the following day, I sit down and I prepare my lessons. And sometimes it can take 2 to 3 hours of just knowing what I need to be prepared to offer them. The main lesson takes up the bulk of my lesson planning, because oftentimes it could be a concept that I'm unfamiliar with, and so I want to do as much research and learning on my own so I can present it to them in such a way as they understand it, but also in many ways, because not everyone understands things to the same capacity, and you want to be able to explain things maybe this way for this student, or maybe the student needs to hear it a little bit differently for them to understand it to the best of their ability. So every night I do a few hours of main lesson preparation. Then, of course, there's that higher level learning. Like when I started teaching them in third grade math was easy. I can do third grade math. But now that they're in the seventh grade, I need to relearn myself some of these mathematical concepts, but also relearn them in such a way that I can teach them to them so that they understand. And then, the English language arts lessons, there's a little bit more freedom with, but still, needing to be prepared, because you're going to have, 26 eyes looking at you, 13 sets of eyes looking to you to do the next thing. And I need to model for them the confidence and the competence to be an adult in this stage of my life. Like I'm modeling for them integrity and reliability and responsibility and accountability. But actually, I think the most important thing I can do during a lesson is actually make a mistake. because when I make a mistake in my lesson, maybe I've said something wrong, maybe I've written down something wrong, maybe I've calculated something wrong, whatever that mistake may be. When I make that mistake, I can model for them how to be responsible and accountable for having made that mistake. I can be like, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. And I can laugh about it. And then I can model to them how to correct my mistake. And then I can model to them how to apologize for having made that mistake. And I think that might be the most important thing that I can do for them, is not always stand in front of the classroom and just know all this stuff, but to not know all this stuff and to say, hey, I'm sorry. Let me correct that. And I think that's a really important lesson for kids to learn, especially with, the TikTok videos and the Instagram videos and all the TV shows and the movies where everybody appears to do everything right all the time so easily. But that's unrealistic. Yeah. So yeah, I like making mistakes for the kids to learn from.
It's a helpful thing.
Yeah.
It's a very helpful thing to see that humanity is not flawless.
Yes.
I think we often confuse the word perfection with flawlessness, which is such an interesting thing. Because I have done this study previously around the idea of perfection, which really stems from a word that means about being fully developed, like being complete and whole and fully developed, at least in the way that we often use it.
Yes.
So if you were, so much of, at least of Western culture, has that kind of Judeo-Christian root. And the way we talk about perfection has that biblical connection.
Mm-hmm.
And biblically, it's from a Hebrew word, the word perfect, or being perfect. And it has that idea of being fully developed.
Wow.
But we've taken it and we use it to mean flawless.
Yes.
And we have this mistaken idea that we can't make mistakes. It's not allowed. Where being able to be the adult in the room and to say, I made a mistake. Let me model how to handle that. Yeah, I think about my own experience as a teacher, where some of the mistakes I had were relational with a student, where I mishandled a situation.
Sure.
And then got to say, that was me.
Yeah.
Like, can we make a repair in the rupture we have?
Yeah.
It's so beautiful to be able to teach them resilience and recovery and repair.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And so another really important part of the teacher's day is basically the end of the day, where I look back on all of those interactions that I had, whether it was academic or social, and I can see where things maybe should have played out a little bit differently. And then taking that into my next day, and again, being able to model that I've grown and learned from the previous day as an adult. I think along those lines of, being perfect and flawless, children have the tendency to see their adults as being perfect and flawless. And we adults are, no, we're still developing along this path also. And so, yeah, we need to model that humility for sure. Yeah.
Are there practices that help you to be like in the right frame? Because I mean, we've been talking about the spiritual component of the classroom, like the mind, the heart, the spirit.
Yeah.
What helps you be in the right place for that environment too, not just the academics?
I've actually developed a mantra. I've developed a mantra, and it almost plays subconsciously now without me even needing to bring it to mind. But just I am a vessel of light. I am radiance, and I shall overcome any darkness. And that could be in any interaction with myself, with the other, with, maybe confusion in a math class, or just this constant prompting and reminding that I am and I can be open and receptive, that it's not, things are fluid, things aren't closed, that there needs to be this rhythm, this circulation in everything that you do. And when you can be open, it's just a little bit easier. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I'm curious, like, are there, like, so you have this mantra that helps you be open. Are there other things that you do that help you to be in the right frame of being?
Yeah, seeing the others, seeing the students as also being the vessels. And so what you are providing for them, there was an interaction the other day where one student said something negative about their own self. And he said, I don't know, I'm so stupid, or something like that. And his peers that were sitting around him were so offended by it. They're like, "You're not stupid. Why would you say that? Don't say you're stupid. It's stupid to say you're stupid." And how 12-year-olds, how 12-year-olds support each other. And it's we need to be good and kind to ourselves in that very same way that we need to be good and kind to other people. And when we can be good and kind to ourselves, it makes it easier to be, a better person in any interaction. So when I can see that whatever is put in front of the children needs to be at this level of almost like a higher standard of expectation, right? So if I put that standard of expectation on myself, that's something else I can model for them, that I can expect you to stand up and be better to yourself and others. Yeah, just seeing them as, and when I say vessels of light, it's that divine light. And it's almost very similar to that verse that we say in the morning, the early grades verse, more importantly, the sun with loving light makes bright for me each day, the soul with spirit power. And it's no wonder that the Latin word for sun is soul, right? And that soul power, that light. And when that light can just emanate, and you can be a vessel for it, and you can share it, it's almost like raising them to this higher level of experience. Yeah.
It's so beautiful, especially where that does seem very counterculture, to be able to look at ourselves and say, I can be open to receiving. Yes. And then to look at a child, a teen, and to say, you also, I see the light, I see the radiance from within you, and we can be in communion with each other.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. The light in me acknowledges the light in you.
Yes. Together we shall shine bright.
You mentioned earlier, like, I think it was even before we started recording, but you were talking about the importance of community in this type of learning environment. I'm curious, why is the community so essential for this whole child approach to learning?
As a community, communication. We want to, we want to go wordplay. All of those words are definitely connected, meaning just to togetherness, that interplay and that interaction that you have with other people. Humans are social beings. We find more value in ourselves when we can be of service to another. And so without the community, I don't think this could be as beneficial to the individual without the community who all shares that same mentality towards this style of education. They say it takes a village to raise a child. Is that phrase? It takes a village to raise a child, because it's not done in isolation. I may have the child in the classroom during the day, but then that same child is going to be at home at night. And if the same values aren't being shared in both home and school, there's going to be a disconnect, and you'll be able to see that in the child. And so it's important for the community to foster this style of education to make it successful for the development of the human. Yeah.
What kinds of things have you seen that foster really healthy community in this way? I guess in this way, I mean, healthy community around this whole child education experience.
The parental support, community engagement, where currently we have like a garden plot at Spaces of Opportunity in South Phoenix, and that's a cooperative supported agricultural experience. And so going out into the community, we also have a partnership where we visit another micro school, Flower Farms, and we'll do some yard work with them, or play kickball, or go to one of their festivals. And festivals and assemblies are also really important to bring people together for a positive experience. So definitely the festivals can foster and cultivate that community where it's, here we learn about, this particular time of year and this particular event, such as Michaelmas or Martinmas, or even the spiral walk during Advent. But when we can share that with the community and bring the community in to see what the child and how the child is growing and learning is I think it's beneficial to the community and the students alike. So we're going to have our first festival the end of April, and at this festival, we may share a recorder song and some of the songs we learned during main lesson, so the parents can get a glimpse of that purposeful work. And then there'll be a circus performance so they can see what the students have been learning during their circus classes. And the students even built their own stilts during woodwork to wear during the circus performance. So when we can bring people together for a shared experience that has this element of levity and fun, it unites the people. Oftentimes when we see people at the end of the day and you're like, oh, how was your day? The first thing that comes to mind is going to be, oh, well, you're not going to believe what happened, then. And so there's almost like this drive to share something that may have upset you or hurt you or had been negative with another, to feel that closeness and that comfort. And so that's why I feel the festivals and the events and the assemblies are so important as community experiences, so we can share those positive interactions of fun. So we can say, you're not going to believe what happened today. There was, we walked on stilts that I made, as opposed to I fell when I was walking on my stilts. So yeah, to bring the enrichment and the enlivening and the positivity to the shared experiences, because it's so easy to let those experiences go, when something upsetting can overshadow it. And again, that's the light and the levity. Yeah.
Yeah. I it's such a really wonderful experience. You come together, it's festive, it's a festival.
Yeah.
The children are active participants, they're members of the community. The adults come to share and support, to celebrate. There's giving, there's receiving, there's rejoicing. And there always seems to be a larger intention as well of we're connecting to the natural rhythm of the season. We're bringing light into the darkness on the lantern walk. So there's and it really does bring people together in a different way.
It's true.
It allows for the positivity to come through. When I say positivity, I mean it allows us to be present in a way that acknowledges more than simply the difficult, but the totality of experience.
Right. Some people say that this style of education is healing and restorative, and I don't think children would view it so much as feeling healing and restorative, but I think the adults that are witness to it can find the healing and the restorativeness with those experiences that we share with the community. Yes.
Well, it makes me think about how this whole conversation really can be a metaphor for educating the child within.
Yeah.
Where we as the adult are the teacher for the child within us.
Yes.
I wonder if we were to just approach the idea of re-educating the whole child, like really using a Waldorf model for the inner child in an adult. How would you approach that?
I think it would be similar to what you've already mentioned earlier when you said the biography work you were doing with the sacred purpose and professional practices, and how it was that myth that really allowed you to connect with what you were doing. I feel probably biography work and finding those stories that had most resonated with us as we were growing, and understanding why they had such a strong pull or hold on us. I think through biography work and through stories, I think it could be an adult education for the inner child.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Yes.
The use of myth and story to help us understand ourselves better.
Right.
I also wonder, what would it be like? I think I've just been wondering about this for a while, like the idea of the opening and closing verse in a Waldorf experience. What if we were to have those types of experiences every day as adults?
Like when we got to work in the morning, maybe it was your shift, and then you and your boss and all of your fellow employees, stood in a circle and shared some words. Yeah, I believe it would make a dramatically different standard for the day. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The use of ritual,
Yeah.
story, movement,
Right.
connection with the world around us, allowing ourselves to embrace our intrinsic flaws.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And yeah, just know that we are not in isolation or alone, that we are all here together, no matter what type of work we're doing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would feel like a very different world.
Yes. Yes, I believe so. Mm-hmm.
I feel like a very, very different world that we live in. This has been so rich and so beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan, for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Is there anything that you would like people to know about the work you're engaged in, that they could find you or come and connect with you in any way?
Currently, we are creating a website that's called SOQ Community. And the SOQ stands for School of Quintessence. And quintessence is not a very familiar word to many people, but we know that there are the 4 elements. And then there was the medieval mystics that believed that there was a 5th element. And that 5th element is what all of the celestial bodies were created from: the stars, the planets, the moon, the sun. But they didn't know what it was because they couldn't study it. And so they just named it quintessence. And so that is why that is the name of our school and community, the School of Quintessence, because we are all made of the stars. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So beautiful.
Yeah. So School of Quintessence in Tempe. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, hopefully there's some people who find their way to you.
Yes. Thank you, Dan.
So thank you for spending time together.
It was a wonderful experience.
I agree. I wonder if you would be okay sharing a closing verse as a way to close this time that we've had together.
Okay. Let me get in my 2 p.m. frame of mind, Monday through Friday. All right. To wonder at beauty and guard over truth, look up to the noble, resolve on the good. This leadeth us truly to purpose in living, to right in our doing, to peace in our thinking, and teaches us trust in the workings of the Spirit, in all that there is, in the widths of the world, in the depths of the soul.
Thank you so much for joining me and Chloe for this meaningful conversation, and I hope it stirred something in you, whether it was a memory of your own childhood, a new vision for the children in your life, or a deeper awareness of the inner child still longing for rhythm, story, and soul. If today's episode resonated, I'd invite you to take it a step further. Reflect on one ritual or rhythm from your childhood, nourishing or not, and consider how you might reclaim or reimagine it in your life today. That simple act of remembrance can be the beginning of some profound healing. And if you're craving more of these kinds of conversations, more space to integrate, reflect, and grow, I want to personally invite you to our upcoming Fertile Dark Book Club. It's completely free to join, and we'll be exploring Nature and the Human Soul by Bill Plotkin, diving deep into soul-centric development, rites of passage, and what it means to grow into true adulthood. You can find all the details and sign up at fertiledark.com/gatherings. And as always, thank you for being part of this community. Your presence here really does matter. And until next time, keep delving deep and embracing the journey.